There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. So I'm using some different equipment. It's not new equipment, but different equipment. This is the first time I'm making a BookTube video using my iPhone. It's not a very new iPhone. I don't know how old it is. My mom gave it to me. It's her old iPhone. It's not like an iPhone 4 or anything, but it might be. I don't know. I have no idea. But I've been testing it, and I think the camera's it's not nearly as good as the iPad Pro, but it's good enough. I think it's acceptable, and I'm not going to get in the habit of making videos in my own home using it, but it would be a lot lighter to carry out and about for outdoor videos and vlogging and so on. And I'm also using it. I'm using it with, remember the little blue Yeti? And it seems to be not bad. So I'd love any comments if you really hate it or think it's fine or whatever. A few comments about that would be great for me. Feedback would be welcome. All right, enough about that. I am in such a good mood. I'm exhausted, but in the happiest way possible, because I had one of the most amazing nights that I've had since I moved to Saskatchewan last night. So because it was so amazing, I didn't finish all the books I was planning to finish, and I thought to myself, don't worry about finishing up books. You got so much to tell your viewers about last night that this might be a big chunk of the video. I went to a kind of book launch event at McNally Robinson, which is the bookstore closest to my house, and it was for this memoir by my old prof. I Never Met a Rattlesnake I Didn't Like by David Carpenter. And I went with my dear friend Kathy, who used to be my prof, and I have stories, people. So David Carpenter didn't necessarily remember me. He thought my face looked familiar and he thought my name looked familiar, but he didn't clearly remember me. That's fine. He's now 80. How many students has he had over the years? But he was very friendly. He signed my book and signed all my books. He wrote here, "For Sean, a Carpenter survivor." I'll talk about the book in a minute. And so I was delighted that I am enjoying one of his other books so much that I could very authentically tell him how much I was loving it. And this is this Courting Saskatchewan one. And this is a very personal, it's not a memoir, but anyway, I've talked about it before, but there's a lot about him and his wife, Kiever, in it. And I didn't know her, although I must have met her because I went to David Carpenter's house once for something or other to do with my involvement in the gay community. David Carpenter's not gay, but he was a strong ally of the gay community. And I went to his house for some reason in the 80s, and he brought me up to his writing den that he writes about a lot in this book. And I met Kiever, but I have no memory of it other than that someone let me in the house. But there's so much about her, and I now know so much about him and his family, and it's so fascinating. And I'm loving the book so much. There is a poem in here that he wrote. I didn't know he wrote poetry. There's a poem about February winter in Saskatchewan that I will read you next February. I'm going to put it in my calendar so I don't forget. But like I say, it was just wonderful to be able to, in a really heartfelt way, tell him how much I was loving this book, and also to tell him that I have read this book that he was the editor of, The Literary History of Saskatchewan, that I read it from cover to cover. It took me about a year. I read it on Scribd back before I hated Scribd, and now I have my own paper copy. So here I got all of these signed, so that was marvelous. It's almost indescribable what a magical evening it was, because I was there with Kathy and we're very close friends, and we're kind of getting to know each other anew now that I'm back here. This is the third time I've met her since I moved back, and I think she's watching. Hello. Oh, I'm looking in the wrong way. I gotta keep remembering, Sean. Look at the camera lens thing, little tiny dot of a hole on the left side. I'm sorry, I've been looking in the wrong way because I'm so used to looking. Anyway, Kathy came over and we sat here and drank wine till, I don't know, almost midnight, 11 o'clock, and a grand old time. Kathy introduced me to a friend of hers who is a writer and teaches creative writing at the university. I'm not going to mention her by name, but I think I'm going to meet her again, and I have already invited her to come on my channel. She is a novelist, and her novel, I don't know if it's her debut because I don't know enough about her writing yet. Eager to find out all the details, but her most recent novel was on a very prestigious prize list in the last year. And I didn't know all that when I was talking to her. I didn't remember her name because, you know, you forget the name as soon as you meet the person, and I asked Kathy later, and the name didn't ring a bell for me, but Kathy said, oh, she wrote, and she named the title. I said, oh, I've heard of that book. I think it got quite a bit of attention on BookTube. And she sat beside me while we were waiting for the program to begin, and I told her, I can't remember why I mentioned that I was a booktuber, but she was really interested in it, and so I had given her my card, and I wrote the channel name on the back. I don't have a card that has my channel name on it. My card that I printed a few weeks back is for ESL. Not that it's generated me any business whatsoever yet, but and then found out more about her from Kathy afterwards. So yeah, she's a well-known writer in Canada, and I would love to hang out with her. And she's a good friend of Kathy's, so that might be possible. And then while I was talking to her, and also I was talking to David Carpenter, and he was signing my books, and had a lovely little conversation with him, Kathy was turned around speaking to a woman who looked familiar to me behind her. And I'm not going to name her either, but I thought, I think that's that English prof that I never took a class from, but you know, she looked exactly like how I remembered this prof to look. And when I could kind of, at the opportune time to kind of butt in at the end of their conversation, I said, are you, and then I said her name, Samantha Smith, and she said, yes. I said, well, I remember you. I didn't take any of your classes, but, you know, certainly you're a very familiar face from my days at the University of Saskatchewan English department in the early 90s. And she said, oh, well, what's your name? And I said, it's Sean Mooney. I don't know that I often say my name on my video, but I'm not shy about saying my name. But Sean Mooney. And she said, that's crazy. I remember you. But she said, you know, the other day, just yesterday, she said, I was talking to a friend about a different Sean. And she said, I can't remember his last name, but his first name is Sean. And this professor said, I said, oh, is it Sean Mooney? And her friend said, no. And she said, that was just yesterday. So your name is bumping around in my psyche. And now I'm meeting you again. And not again. I don't think we ever met. But just, you know, she was very familiar. She was very, you know, prominent member of the faculty. So I didn't talk to her very long, but that was just fascinating. So in just a few short minutes, I had made these connections, you know, especially with the writer that I was sitting beside, and, you know, who knows, but I'd love to see her again sometime. David Carpenter didn't remember me very well, but he was very warm and friendly, and you know, I'd love to see him again at any literary event. It was my first literary event in Saskatoon since I moved back. And it's really my first in-person literary event in years and years and years and years because, well, I guess the last one would have been when Madeleine Tien came to Tokyo. My literary events have been limited to Zoom since the pandemic and since I was been in Tokyo, really. It was so stimulating, and I hope, because David Carpenter was an English prof, there was a lot of English profs there, and I recognized people and so on, and then the program began. So I'll just say a little bit about the book, but this is a book about nature. This is a book about David Carpenter's experience with wild animals, specifically predatory. He called them apex predators. I don't know if I'd ever heard that phrase before, but, you know, the top of the pecking order or whatever of the animal kingdom. In particular, rattlesnakes, grizzly bears, cougars, and wolves, but I think other species like that. And his encounters as an amateur nature enthusiast. And from an environmental perspective, but also David Carpenter is hilarious. And he portrays himself, whether it's accurate or exaggerated, I don't know, in the book as kind of a bumbling idiot. He doesn't know what he's getting into. And so he read us several short sections of the book, and they were hilarious and informative. And then he had a conversation, on stage interview with another prominent Saskatchewan writer, Dave Margoshes, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, and talk more about his environmental. But this, I'm going to put a bee in Doris and Heidi's bonnet, that this should go on their Naturalist Book Club next year, because I think it's, I mean, just based on what he read, and he read for about 45 minutes, and the time just flew by. Often my mind wanders when I'm at an author's reading, and it didn't at all. He read it very well, and the stories were just fabulous. So, Heidi, Doris, you'll be hearing from me soon. And just as the program was starting, another of my old profs walked in and sat right in front of me. I had two distinct phases of my University of Saskatchewan life. One was from 84 to 88, when I did a history degree, but I took some English courses. And I remember loving them so much that I actually got some counseling about whether I should switch my major. But I didn't switch my major. But then, sober second thought, 3 years out of university, I re-enrolled to do... I'm looking in the wrong place again. God damn it. I re-enrolled starting in 91 and did the equivalent of an honors in English literature, and then went on to do my master's at York. This professor was from my first go around at the university, and I took his second year class on the 20th century British novel. And I don't know why I was so shy. It was a large class. I think I took it the year that I came out, and so my profile on campus, because I became the president of the gay group on campus, and I don't know if that's also made me shy, because I remember after I first came out in the city newspaper, or whenever it was, I came out publicly a couple different ways. One was on a radio talk show, phone-in thing with my mom, and I think the same weekend there was an article about me and my family, and not the front page of the paper, but the front page of the lifestyle section. The lifestyle section. Anyway, and I was the president of the gay group on campus, and whatever thing it was, I had always sat beside one of the cutest guys in that class. Blonde guy, built like a brick shithouse, and very friendly, and I didn't ever, have any... Well, anyway, he was straight, I'm sure, and after the weekend after all my big coming out party, he sat in another place. And I looked around, where is he? And I looked around, and he's sitting 3 rows back. He didn't ever sit with me again. So I can laugh about it now, but it was those kind of things. So I was kind of shy in that class. I never spoke up, but I was his top student. But I never, ever asked a question in class or answered any of the questions that he would pose to the class. I just soaked it all up and just loved reading the literature. And it started me on a lifetime of reading. And I don't remember what the essay, which book it was about, or which author it was about, but about halfway through the course, I can't remember if it was a full year's course or a half year's course, I don't remember now. But, we read Muriel Spark, we read all of them, you name it, we read them. The professor, who I'm not going to name, but just, until such time as I don't know, I just feel weird about using their names. I use Kathy's names because she's a friend, but before handing back the essays, he took the entire class time, the hour, to read my essay aloud. He didn't name me, but he said, I'm going to read the best essay that I got for this batch, and I want you to listen carefully, and I'm going to explain to you why it's a great essay and how you should write your essays. And so he read it out loud, and after every sentence or paragraph, he would stop and kind of say, this, look at what he does here, and blah, blah, blah. And I just wanted to, well, I was certainly, feeling pretty proud of myself, but also really, really embarrassed. He didn't name me, but that's something I will never, ever forget. So anyway, so there he is, and he's quite elderly now. He came in with a cane, but I recognized him immediately, and he sat right in front of me. So after the program, I jumped up and introduced myself, and he remembered my name, and he was so touched that I spoke to him. Apparently he has recently lost his wife, and he just kind of exuded loneliness, and we just had this most wonderful chat, and I told him that, because he didn't teach Barbara Pym or any of the British women writers that I so love, but he's the one that started all that reading project, that reading journey for me, and I was quite effusive in a way that seemed to really touch him about that. And so I said, yeah, I've now read the complete works of Barbara Pym, and I'm now currently working my way through Rosamund Lehman and Elizabeth Jane Howard. We had just a fantastic chat. So I hope I cross paths with him again. So there was just something indescribable about sitting in that room and remembering my past self, where I was the kind of the golden child of the English department. The year I graduated, I got the top marks for the English department, so I got to go to this formal banquet with my parents and my 96-year-old grandmother. I don't remember how old she was at the time, to accept my award from the dean, my certificate or whatever. And you know, I've never felt that. I'm losing my words here. I've never felt quite so at home in the world as I did during those years. I've never felt quite that I belonged in it and was valued to quite that, with quite that intensity. And so just sitting there, it was quite a trip, I have to say. So I'm so glad to be back in Saskatoon, and this bookstore has 2 or 3 events like this a week, and I didn't really know about it until recently. I'm just, as much as I've been shopping there, you have to click on the certain page on their webpage, and I had never done that. So it's like, oh my God, there's all this stuff going on, and I could walk there in 20 minutes or half an hour or 5 minutes on the bus and be going to this stuff all the time and meeting bookish people. At the end of the night, just as Kathy and I were leaving to come here to drink lots of wine, she introduced me to another friend of hers who is high up. I think she said used to be the president of the Saskatchewan Writers Guild. And I didn't, in a self-promoting way, bring up my booktube channel, but somehow it came up in conversation. I think Kathy said, oh, Sean's a YouTuber, blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh, what's your channel name? So, hello, person. I won't name you either without your permission, but I have a feeling that a lot of these people I'm talking about are going to be showing up on this channel, if not on a regular basis, certainly once or twice from here on in. So that was just an exquisite evening. I can't explain how much of a boost it gave me. So wanted to share that. And how long have I? That was 20 minutes. So yeah, I'm going to make my book chat short. Don't get angry, Natalie. It's just that I don't want to be up till midnight editing. So I have books to tell you about. I'm going to be a little bit briefer than usual. Oh, and I haven't commented. I'm in a new place in the apartment to make a video. This is right by the bathroom. The bathroom's right there if you need it. And the bedroom's right here. The door's closed. And this little shelf that my friend Gwen gave me. And it fits perfectly right here. And I just thought, I'm going to film in a different place today. See how that goes. I do have a lot of things to tell you. I have one bale to tell you about. And I have started 3 that I haven't finished. And I have finished 2. I got some appreciative comments about my kind of new policy that I don't give star ratings to books I don't write by writers from marginalized communities. And I will not go on a rant about why I don't like books written by authors from marginalized communities. I'm taking it one step further, because I did bail on one of the books by an Indigenous author that I told you I would be starting this week. I'm also not going to put their book in the show notes so that they won't stumble upon my negative comments about why I bailed on it. I will still put the thing on the screen, but it's not going to show up in the show notes. It just gives an extra step to kind of protect them from my opinion. So yes, the book that I didn't get very far into before I bailed was by an Indigenous writer who lives in Saskatchewan, Carol Rose Golden Eagle, Bone Black. And I just didn't like the writing. I found it really cliched and just didn't grab me at all. I read a chapter and a half or something, and you know, it's got a 3.76 star rating on Goodreads, so lots of other people liked it. The 2 of my Goodreads friends both gave it 4 stars. The story was going in the direction of being a story about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So it's an important story. It wasn't a story that I cared to read in that form by that writer. So I will find other stories like that. And when it's as important of an issue as that, I tend to gravitate more to the nonfiction. That happened, and I replaced it because I was reading at the library. I applied for that job. I haven't heard anything yet. The it just closed. Like the application deadline was just earlier this week, so I'm still hoping I get an interview, but we'll see. So I was sitting at the library when I decided to bail, so I don't have the book anymore, so that's why you're seeing the GIF. And then I scoured the shelves and found another one, so that's one of the books that I've started. Now let's go right to that one. I found this book on the shelves at my branch of the library, and it's a well used copy of the book. It's called The Raindancers. It's got a nice illustration on the cover. And I'm from now on, I'm not going to hold it up. I'm going to put the GIF without the ugly library stickers. The author is Enole Bellegarde, and this was self-published. So I had very low hopes, low expectations going in, and I have read less than 20% of it. I'm on page 19, and I'm finding it gripping. So the comparison, this is published by Author House, so I mean basically you pay to have it published, right? That's how that works. And the other novel was published by a publisher, and I just didn't connect with the writing. I didn't like the writing. And here the writing is not literary, but it reads like an oral narrative, and it's powerful. And this author, Enole Bellegarde, has written stories. Yes, she said she's changed all the names to protect the privacy. And it's based on her Cookham grandmother's life, and her name was Igwe, and Igwe came from I'm reading right now about her parents as children, and they grew up in a very abusive situation with Indigenous parents that didn't take care of them. And it's really good. Like I say, I'm only less than 20 pages in, but it has just made me reflect on, is the writing here objectively better than the book that I bailed on? I don't think so, but there's something about the there's some vitality to the way she's telling the story. She's not this is not a work, like I say, of literary fiction, but it is powerful. And I'm not going to question it anymore. I'm just going to keep reading it, but that comparison and contrast has been an interesting part of my reading week this week. I have made a bare start on this because I've had a bunch of other things on the go, but oh my god, Anukrti Upadhyay's second novella that I've read, Bhaunri, is starting out just as grippingly as Dowra did. I've only read 20 pages of it, and I absolutely love it. This is a story about Bhaunri. Bhaunri is a young girl in Rajasthan, and she was promised to a much older man when she was still a child. She didn't even see him the day that the promise was made. I think she was about 12 or 11 when the promise was made, and then years later, when she came of age, he came for her. And I'm just at the part where the husband has picked her up. So it's one of those very traditional stories. I'm on a first-name basis with Anukrti because she's been on my show and has been watching my videos for a few years. Does just a fabulous job of portraying the cultural background, the different ethnicities, the different, I think the word one would use is tribes of people. And one of them is the Gujars, and the Gujars is where Bhaunri's mother, the tribe that her mother came from, and her father came from the Lohars. And there's enough information, there's a lot of information of both of those. They were on kind of on the spectrum of the caste system, and typically did this and that in terms of trades. That's all richly described in a way that just intensifies the story. I won't say too much about it because I'm trying to keep it brief here, but oh, it's starting out so good. I am reading a memoir called, I'll just hold this naked hardback up for a moment and then put the cover GIF up. Chantemesle is how I would pronounce it, but it's a French place name, and I'm sure the French have a much more romantic way of pronouncing it. The author is a British writer, Robin Fedden, and it's a memoir of his childhood growing up, and Chantemesle is in Normandy. He grew up on the Seine River. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Oh dear. And it's a memoir of his childhood because it was a lush natural area. And this was originally published in 1964. It is gorgeously written, and there aren't enough people in it. So I'm enjoying it, but probably it's not going to be a 5-star read in spite of the just gorgeous nature writing. So I think someone like Heidi or Doris might enjoy it more than me. But I would like to see, well, I'm only halfway through, so and it's short, it's 100 pages, and I think I'm about halfway mark. So there may be more people in the second half. It's not like I'm bored, but I do need a little bit more of a story. I'm thinking about what I just said. Doesn't have to be story, but there has to be people. You can just tell me about the people's personalities with no plot. I'll be happier. But if you're just describing the natural surroundings, I do want more than that. So almost all the books I have to talk about today are set very much nature settings and very much evocative of place in nature, if not focused outright on nature, like Chantemesle. So I'll have more to say about this when I finish it, probably in the coming week. Those are the 3 books that I have started this week. So now let me tell you about the 2 books I finished. I have finished this German novel set in Scotland, The Peacock, by Isabel Bogdan, translated from the German by Annie Rutherford. I loved this. I loved it. It's another book that made me very happy. There's been a few of those. I think my whole reading year is going to be defined by the fact that Sean the Book Maniac has finally developed a taste for books that make him happy. Is it anything to do with moving back home? I'm not sure. This was just wonderful. This is not a book for everyone, and although there's no graphic scenes of what would you say, not cruelty to animals, I guess depending on your perspective, but sort of hunting or killing animals for one reason or another, which within the life of the characters in the novel is fully justified, or, you know, it makes sense. But people that are not into reading about that sort of thing, like I say, it's not gory, it's not graphic, but I have some subscribers that would want to stay far away from this. Also, preparing fowl for the oven, and plucking the feathers and stuff. So that there's a lot of that, which may turn some people off. I don't know if that would turn Lindy off or some vegetarians. I have no idea. But anyway, this was hilarious. But this humor is very subtle. I don't think I got the humor until about a third of the way in, and then I just couldn't stop smiling and often just kind of chortling at the story. Yeah, this is going to work out well because I want to keep this video short. I'm going to do a full review. I'm ready to film my review today, so it will go up soon. I've had a mental block about doing reviews since I got to Saskatchewan. I don't know what that's about, but this one I'm confident that I can do a pretty good review of it because I liked it more than other readers. I loved it. Not a perfect novel, whatever the hell that is, but it was a perfect read for me. I recommend it very highly. And curious that it's all told in indirect speech. So I thought that was very successful. So stay tuned for my full review. There's nothing else translated by Isabel Bogdan. I hope that gets rectified soon because this was wonderful. And just about 20 minutes ago, I finished reading this to Kendra Winchester, The Lost Garden by Helen Humphreys. So it's a reread from me. I think I loved it even more, certainly as much. A 5-star read. I loved it as much as I did when I first read it. This was a gift originally from Lindy. Reading it out loud was a joy. The prose is just so gorgeous. And this is very much about gardens and finding yourself through nature and gardening. And the people in it, especially the protagonist, Gwen, was a fascinating character. I have a full review that I did years ago, and I think during my first year on BookTube. I don't know if the review's any good, but I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Oh, by the way, the reading that I went to last night, David Carpenter's new memoir, it was a hybrid event, so people could watch on Zoom at the same time, and that video has already gone up on the bookstore's website. No, that video has already gone up on YouTube. So I'll put a link to it in the show notes. I just had a quick look at it this morning, and I didn't think the audio and video quality was all that great, so you'd have to really listen or turn the volume way up, and I don't think it's worth your time. But have a check it out, see if it works for you. But I was glad I was there in person. But no, anyway, back to The Lost Garden. This makes me want to read more Helen Humphreys. There's quite a few of her earlier novels I haven't gotten to. I've read one book of poetry and I've read one of her nonfiction books, and I think I know she's had at least one book out since that one. Though I read the one about apples. It was a buddy read with Heidi a couple of years ago maybe. And she's had at least one, maybe two out since then. I got lots more Helen Humphreys reading to do. I didn't get along with her two most recent novels, but there's a lot of other stuff of hers that I love, and this is one of the very best novellas I've ever read. I finished two, but I will probably finish the Chantemesle nature memoir in the next few days. So here are the next three books that I will start. Those of you that follow, all 12 of you that follow my bite-sized book chat series, a lovely reader that's on one of my Goodreads friends, Linny from the UK, has been on my channel on bite-sized book chats once. I have another bite-sized book chat with her that's in the editing pipeline. And she and I are doing our first buddy read. It's going to be the pseudo buddy read. We're not going to check in after every 5 chapters or whatever. We're just going to hook up on Zoom in early November when we've both finished this novel. This is part of the British Library Women Writers series, Chatterton Square by E.H. Young. It's chunky, so I want to get started on it because, with all the books I'm reading, it'll take me until the end of the month to finish it. These British Library Women Writers series, they're just gorgeous, heavy French flap books that I love the feel of them. The only one I've read I didn't like very much, so it kind of put me off trying another one, but that's silly. So I hope I like this one better. And this was originally published in 1947. E.H. Young was a prolific British novelist who wrote Miss Mole, and this was her last novel. It's about marriage and families, so I'm here for that. And this is another indigenous, let's see, what is this? This appears to be a memoir by a woodland Cree writer in Saskatchewan, Nancy LaFleur, and it's called Finding Lost. Isn't that a gorgeous cover? I can put my finger over the ugly label. I'll put the GIF up if I can find it now. And it's a short little memoir, 85 pages, although it's quite tiny type. And it is about her life's journey following childhood trauma. She is a member of the Lac La Ronge Indian Band and a teacher. Sounds like a fascinating woman. And if you can't tell, I am so impatient for Indigathon to begin that I have kind of started Indigathon in early October, if not late September. So this will be one of my pre-Indigathon reads. And then if I do finish the Chantemesle or some other book early this week, I will start this one that I got from the library by another settler writer from Saskatchewan that I'd never heard of. It is called The Wheaton by Joanne Jackson. It's quite a nice cover. I just hate the library stickers. I've never heard of her, never heard of this publisher. The publisher is Stonehouse Publishing in Alberta. This came out in 2019. I've actually forgotten. I'm pretty sure the author, Joanne Jackson, is based in Saskatchewan. I like the premise of this novel. Protagonist is retired, so I don't know how old he is, but whether he took early retirement, but anyway, he was retired and his wife died very young, so I don't imagine she was 20, but she was younger than him and she died way too soon. And so then the protagonist comes out of retirement and starts working at a senior's residence, and that's the opening premise. And he's always been a kind of a loner and never really wanted to connect with a whole bunch of people, or he's been kind of introverted or antisocial, I'm not sure. And then plot ensues. So that sounds like a Sean story, don't you think? The name of the place, the senior citizen's residence, is The Wheaton. The author, Joanne Jackson. I'm eager to give it a try. So I have had just an incredible week reading-wise, and to steal the book cougar's phrase, Biblio-adventures. And may it continue. Thanks for watching.